So I am thrilled to be in Edmonton, mostly because I can actually remember where I am today. I think I've been in 30-ish cities in the last 2 or 3 months. I have no clue. And I'm about 10 days away from home, so that feels good. So it's good to be in Alberta. It is also where I was born, not in Edmonton exactly, but on the eastern flanks of the Rocky Mountains, hence the love and adoration of skiing, which you'll hear about in a little bit. So it feels like home, and it mostly, an additional part of that is because probably about, I'm counting in my head right now, 10, 15, 20% of you are wearing like hockey jerseys, which makes me feel like I'm home, yeah, in the back. I'm home. And probably more of you have them like in your bags ready to go. So this is great. So we're going to do a bunch of things tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, which I think all of you should have received on the way in. I'm going to do a little bit of a reading. You've probably already read half of the book by now. She started reading as soon as she sat down, which is great. And then we're going to take a small break so you can get another glass of wine and have a few more nibbles. And then we're going to do a bit of a salon-style Q&A. I know you've got some questions for me, and then we're going to open it up to everybody else. Housekeeping as well. This is my amazing partner, work partner, driving partner, getting coffee partner. It's amazing. And she's got, you guys all have books, but if you do want to buy an additional one, you can get that from Lucy. And there's journals that go with them if you purchase a book, so that's great. And you can do that afterwards. So that's the gist. So let's get rolling. When I come to these events, I think I could talk about a lot of things about this giant ski trip that I took. And that trip was, basically I skied something like 4.1 million vertical feet in a year, which is the equivalent of Everest from summit to sea level about 150 times in a year. And I could tell you about the countries I traveled to. I could tell you about the 52 ski resorts. I could tell you about the people I met along the way. I could even go like a little bit deeper than that and tell you about the divine interventions and kind of some of the spiritual wisdom that I gained and things and doors that opened up for me. But especially because this is a bit more of a corporate group for me, you guys all seem pretty smart. And you can read like that right on the back of the book. Like just flip it on over and all those details are right there. And they're also included inside of the book. So I thought it would be best to give you guys something a little bit more tonight, something a little bit different. And that is the question and the answer to the question that I have been asked for 2008, almost a decade, so 9 years. This same question has been rolling at me like a never-ending set of waves. And that question is, why? Why did you give up your seemingly wonderful life in Vancouver, British Columbia, where you were very competently ticking off the boxes of adulting, very well, and it was kind of the life that people would want, and why did you leave that? And I've been struggling with how to answer this question for close to a decade, for 9 years, and it wasn't until just this last January, and I was out for dinner with a really good friend of mine, and I was like, tell me why. Why did I do it? And she said, Steph, you accepted the dare of life. And you went for all the gusto you could get. And I immediately loved this answer. It just resonated so deeply in my bones. And I think one of the reasons that I loved it so much was because it fits so snugly within what I will call my Joseph Campbellian belief system. Anybody here know who Joseph Campbell is? Raise a hand. No, one person. Lucy's always, I can count on Lucy, right? So Joseph Campbell, just as like a quick, and you gotta look him up, it's amazing. But Joseph Campbell, he's no longer with us, but was the most prominent mythologist of our time. And he studied myth and story and folklore and tale through eras and eras in all different cultures and in all different languages, kind of like an anthropologist of myth. And he discovered a theme, a story arc, that was familiar and the same in all of them. And he calls it the hero's journey. And the initial stages of the hero's journey is the call to adventure, which is gusto. You're nodding now, you're going, I think I know who this is, right? So most of you will know Joseph Campbell's work because he was highly involved in just a little movie, otherwise known as Star Wars. So George Lucas hired him and went, you know something about storytelling, so come on board and let's figure this out. After Star Wars comes, you can name thousands. The Matrix, Harry Potter, The Wizard of Oz. I always miss that one. I'm like, Anne of Green Gables? No, Wizard of Oz. Anne of Green Gables probably fits in there as well. But all of them. So what Jennifer said to me, my friend, fits so snugly within that belief system. And I'm going to do some quotes here. It's the belief system that tells me, if you can see your path laid out in front of you step by step, you know it's not your path. And it is the belief system that tells me we must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us right around the corner. There's just one issue with this gusto response. And I know this because when I say it, in reality, most people just aren't that into it. And I want to get a little bit more specific here. When I talk about gusto as my reason for doing this trip, most people aren't that into it when it's coming from the pen or the mouth of a woman. A little bit more accepting for men, not so much for women. And I know this because of the look in people's eyes when I say, like, it was just gusto, that's all. They're kind of like, really? That's not a good enough reason. And I also know this because of some of the book reviews I've received. You know, you put your work out into the world, and you get good reviews, and I've had those, and you get mediocre reviews, and I've had those, and you get not so good reviews, like cilantro, kind of. People are gonna, So I've had some of the negative reviews, and I'm gonna read them for you tonight, and I know what some of you are thinking, like, who? This is her book launch? Why is she doing this? But it points me, at least, in the direction of something that I believe to be a truth, and that is the direction that I always want to be going in. So, with gusto in mind, let me read these. Number 1. The narrative arc of this memoir sounds very much like that of other books that have become popular accounts of transformative pilgrimages. See Elizabeth Gilbert and Cheryl Strayed. Now that club, I will be happy to sit in. The main difference, if they ever invite me, the main difference is that there was no real crisis that impelled Jagger on her quest. Number 2, there's no pivotal tragic event that specifically brings on Jagger's transformation. Number 3, although this book has been compared to Wild, there's a big difference. There's no significant episode to start Jagger off on her trip. Who here sees a theme in there? Nodding, nodding, nodding. There is an unwritten rule in our society that tells us that women can go for the gusto, but only after they've been broken in some way. Only after there's kind of the pieces of their lives right in front of them ready to be picked up, right? That there has to be another reason other than simply wanting more, different, better. Has to be some other reason. Our society wants stories about women who've had to pick up the pieces. They want drama. They want tales about women who've had whole sections of themselves stripped from their backs and their underbellies by what is often the ferociousness of life. A lot of the publishers that I met with were concerned that readers wouldn't be interested in a story about a woman who hadn't been manhandled in some way, that it would come off as privilege, which it is. It's a story about a white woman skiing around the world. I'm not going to try and say that it isn't, right? There's privilege in there. That's got to be transparent. That I would get a who does she think she is asking for something more when she's already got something good kind of response. Now, one thing I want to make really clear is that I am a huge believer in those other kinds of stories, because how else are we supposed to know how to pick up the pieces when things do fall apart? How else are we supposed to rise from the ashes when the fire came burning in, right? But if those are the only stories that we're telling, the only true stories in memoir, or memoir, some people call it, then there is something missing in the female narrative. Something that the publisher that I did go with believes in just as much as me. You see, if those are the only stories that we're telling, then the strength of women becomes contingent on some part of us being broken. I'm seeing nodding. I'm seeing nodding from like some of the guys. Okay, this is really good. And I don't know about you, but that seems like a really limited future. And based on a little bit of the introduction that Wendy gave, and based on the 4 million feet and the 30 cities in however many days, you can probably guess by now that I don't do limited as a woman or a human. I think our future is so much brighter than that. I think that the strength of women is enough to stand on its own, and that strength on its own is not too much for women to ask for. So my publisher and I have our fingers crossed that you will support us, that you will support stories about women who have had to crawl out from underneath the rubble, and that you will also support stories about women who are asking for a hell of a lot more than just surviving the rubble. Now, there's one other important thing to address when it comes to people's general discomfort or distaste about stories of gusto. And I don't think this has as much gender in it, so the guys can really lean into this part of it right now. Let's really go for it. And this takes me right back to Joseph Campbell and to the very definition of the hero's journey and to our collective response to two things, boredom and discontent, which, by the way, are the exact conditions required for gusto to appear. Let's think about those movies. Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, moisture farmer on a beige planet, like kind of boring, right? A little bit. And then a holographic message from a droid comes down. Something absurd happens when he's bored, right? Interesting. So, Wizard of Oz. I'm gonna look at Lucy, she always corrects me on Wizard of Oz. Wizard of Oz. Dorothy Gale is living in a black and white world. I don't know if you remember the movie, it's actually black and white. Chilling at her aunt and uncle's with her ratty looking terrier. And then a tornado comes in and makes things color. Absurd. Harry Potter. There's a theme about aunts and uncles, I think. Living with his aunt and uncle. In a cupboard underneath the stairs, boring life in the land of the Muggles, called the Muggles. And then owls come in with letters. Absurd. Right? So this is Joseph Campbell's concept of boredom and discontent, and we're searching around like, what else? What else? And something comes in. Okay? But in society, that's storytelling. In society, our collective response to boredom and discontent tends to be a little bit different. As my BFF puts it, boredom is the foundation in the house of change. It's the basement. And making a move from the basement is really hard. So we don't do it. We make small changes instead. We convince ourselves that we're able to grow by taking little baby risks instead of saying yes to what we know or think we know is the gusto. Maybe we change the color of our hair. Maybe we buy, I don't know, what do you buy? Maybe we buy brand new hockey jerseys or snazzy new road bikes, right? Maybe we trade in Flaming Hot Cheetos and a house of cards for PX90 and kale chips, right? Maybe we even change jobs or careers. But oftentimes, that's just a Band-Aid when we know that the universe has chucked a double dog dare right down in front of us, and we're scared to put our toe on it, or even go further than that. So, we stay in the basement, we disregard our boredom and our discontent and the perfect conditions it requires to say yes, and we put it on the back burner of what we convince ourselves are the lives that we're actually living that are busy, too busy. I'm too busy to do that. Put it on the back burner. And when we put it on the back burner, our boredom and discontent turns into other things. It turns into self-sabotage, it turns into overeating, it turns into big trips to the Costco liquor barn like every week with like a cart full of Chardonnay. Or maybe we take a nap. And maybe that nap lasts for a day or a week or a month, or maybe it lasts for a decade. And when we wake up from that nap, our boredom and our discontent has turned into bigger things, much bigger things.